My name is Nathan Han, and this is the first episode of the Filmmakers Journey podcast, a podcast that looks into the lives and the world of filmmaking in Hong Kong and around the world. I am a producer, a young, fresh producer at Sheng Productions, working for about 4 years now in the industry, so still a fresh set of eyes. So I'm excited to speak and meet with some industry giants and professionals to kind of get to know, pull back the curtain on what filmmaking is in this world. This episode is about the freelancer in Hong Kong, focusing on sharing the experiences of living as a freelancer in Hong Kong, exploring what freelancing entails, and giving a glimpse into the life and the various facets. Joining me today, first is Richie Fowler, filmmaker and video director at Casual Productions, with up to 8 years as a freelance filmmaker before joining Casual Productions, working with clients such as Al Jazeera, CBS News, PBS, Decathlon, Art Basel, and Red Bull. We're joined today also by Caius Chung, director and editor at Caius Chung Video Productions, 8 years in the film industry and coming up on 5 years as a freelancer. That's correct. Worked with clients such as SCMP, CNBC, Sotheby's, Discovery Channel, and Lenovo. So big names up on that list. It was very difficult trying to find your clients. I had to go through all their portfolios.
Yeah, I'm surprised.
just to go through and see, okay, let me figure out what brands they've been with.
Cool.
But yeah, there's some really interesting stuff. But you know, as we start, let's start off with a couple of kind of more low-key questions.
Sure.
First, you know, since we're all in film, question is, I know this changes, but what is your current favorite film of all time?
Of all time?
All time.
Asking any filmmaker to have an answer for that right off the bat, I think is incredibly difficult, but like
throughout life?
or just, you said at the moment though, right?
Yeah, because I think that it can change, right? You might like remember a film and be like, oh my God, I can't remember that. That's my current GOAT film. But yeah, like what's current?
I mean, current is harder, but I definitely think for me, all-time favorites are like Doctor Strangelove. I'm a big fan of Doctor Strangelove, that kind of satirical social commentary.
Is that the one with the bomb?
The bomb.
Yes.
The guy,
Yeah,
cowboy,
yes.
flying on the...
Yeah, I remember watching that.
Yeah, being a history buff, I'm big into sort of historical and satirical kind of stuff. But
I would say if I have to pick one, it would probably be The Godfather, because I've always had a love for like gangster, like mob films, or like just about like killers and assassins, because it's a world that most people will never understand. But when it's told through such an intimate lens like that, you really get an idea and like a feeling of what it means to be living in that dangerous kind of lifestyle where it's like you're always at risk, and it's really interesting to watch, especially when it's done by masters in the arts, right? I think so, especially, yeah.
So, big Scorsese.
Yeah, dude, yeah. I mean, not all of them, but like I love most of his, like Goodfellas, obviously, and then even Gangs of New York, I'm a huge fan of.
Shark Tale.
Shark. Well, he was Shark Tale is a great one too. He voiced one of the he voiced a shark. He didn't direct it, but he did like a parody of it.
Wasn't
Robert
he
De Niro
like
was
a
in that
turtle?
too.
He was the pufferfish?
Yeah,
I think he was a pufferfish.
Very nervous
cool.
pufferfish.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think I want to get into some of the questions about you guys. Get to know you better. I think people know enough about Stanley Kubrick that books have been written. So
I need to know more about Caius Chung.
Yeah.
And Richie Fowler.
So first question I'd like to ask both of you is, could you share how you got into film?
I mean, I'll try condense this because I know I ramble and waffle a lot. But simply put, I got into film because my brother used to have a production company. So my brother's quite a few years older than me, and so when I was in high school, his production company was still running, and I kind of got a chance to be involved in that sort of creative environment, which I found it really synced with me. Like I come from a very sporting background, and so working together to kind of like come up with a creative solution and being very hands-on, that really kind of synced with me. And then after high school, I didn't really know what I was going to do. So I did the classic thing of, I studied history. which I think it's a pretty interesting degree. I think it gave me a lot of well-roundedness in a way. And then I worked in a corporate for a year and kind of wanted to kill myself. And then just so happened at that time, I had a good family friend who was also involved he was kind of feeling his way into the video industry. So he was like, come with me, like we'll go on a shoot. Like I'm doing this shoot, it's just me and him, it's very nice, sort of just two of us, very simple. I mean, it's funny because I didn't really pick up a camera until I was like 19 or 20. I've learned everything on the job, basically. This is actually another thing I love about this industry is like, if you kind of leave your ego aside and you just observe, you can actually pick up a lot of things, like, setting lights, how to set up cameras, how to rig and stuff. It's all kind of stuff you can learn. And that's what I've always learned best by doing. I've been someone who's never been able to really sit still at a desk or I'll just fall asleep in class and draw drawings or whatever. But so yeah, that's why I feel like in a way this industry, in a really nice way, has allowed me to be who I am. In like a quite a sweet way.
Yeah, I mean, from what I can tell, I mean, obviously, Caius will hop onto you first in a sec, but I think that a lot of people in film, there are obviously outliers, but a lot of us are experiential learners. We don't learn from staring at a 6,000 page textbook on different focal lengths and
unless
I'm gonna memorize it
great diagrams.
It's all, we're all very experienced. We have to be in the shit on a shoot, and then we learn. We have to hit that focus, and then we learn I turn left or right to hit that. I don't actually know which way.
I meant
hitting focus.
You also a lot, in a way.
Yeah, that's true.
But you learn from those, and that's what I mean. You have to kind of leave your ego aside because you're gonna make mistakes, and hopefully it's not a huge mistake. You don't kill anyone or kill yourself, But I think.
Well, what's interesting is that I think your take and your way of entering the industry is very different than mine, because I went to film school, which is, with the de facto way that most people would get into this industry, right? You would basically spend several years learning everything about film, from pre-production to production to post-production, in a school environment, hopefully with some opportunities to go out and shoot your own things. But I would actually say that my experience in film school was quite limiting in that it was a small film school. They didn't have a lot of resources to give everyone the tools that they really needed to actually go out and do the things that you would expect to be able to do when you go on a shoot. It's I want to be able to go on set and set up cameras and lights and all that. We didn't really have that much available to at least the majority of the film students. It was a small pocket of them who were the really, really talented ones that got all that extra funding and extra tools to do that, right? Because when you have a small
or with the right connections.
Or with right connections, yeah, exactly. But I think if they had the right connections, they probably went to a different film school. But the reality is that I think going to film school was always in my cards, because I always wanted to get into film since I was really, really young. Since I was maybe 10 years old. I always knew this was the only thing I wanted to do in my life. I didn't know how to get there, so obviously film school seemed like the easiest way to get into that. But then it made me realize as well that after you graduate from film school, you basically would go to LA, or you would go to New York. But from all the stories I heard, people there would basically have to work, 5-6 years as assistants, as runners, basically the non-glamorous jobs to really even have a chance of getting to the higher levels. And for someone who wants to get into it right away, I was like, there's no reason why I would spend 6 years basically doing all this grunt work. And this is why I decided to come back to Hong Kong. I worked for 2 small production houses. And during that time, I learned a lot about, like what you were saying, Richie, about experiential learning, right? A lot of it was you kind of get thrown into the deep end in these smaller production houses, right? A lot of the times they will make you just pick up something and then just learn it and then figure out how to do it as you go. And it doesn't always yield the best results, unfortunately, but that is kind of how you, as yourself, you learn through time and through the practice that you get. And I look at the stuff I've done in the past with pride in that I was able to do it, but I also look at it as learning lessons for okay, how can I get better at doing this in the future? Or is this even something I want to do continuing forward? And I think the reason why I stuck with being a freelancer is because I wanted to have the flexibility to be able to do the things that I want to do and not just have to do, go down the routes of like, oh, here's something, just pick it up and figure it out. Like that is kind of when you work for smaller production houses, a lot of the times it's like, we have something you have to do, figure it out.
Yaka taxai. You do everything. And
it's kind of like you just take.
This is the 360 cam. Caius, here, figure it out.
That is actually exactly what I had to do.
It's new tech.
That is actually what I had to do. I was given this is a little bit off topic, but I had to go to Sri Lanka to film. It was like a wildlife documentary show when I was working in my old production house. And one of my tasks was I had to figure out how to rig a 360 rig because my boss wanted to shoot 360 footage. So I had to rig up 6 GoPros inside this giant housing dome. And we had to figure out a way to put it into the water because he had to go into the ocean because he wanted to film with like whales and dolphins or whatever sea life we saw in the ocean. It was not easy because you have 6 cameras and you have to control wirelessly. You have to worry about whether it's going to run out of battery, whether the mount's going to fall off or it's going to get corroded by the water.
They're all going to be in each other's shots.
Yeah, well, that not as much, but it's like all these things that like when you put it together, like this is a very new thing that I'm learning, and they don't know because they're asking me to do it, so I'm figuring it out. So there's a lot of trial and error that goes in this industry, which can be rewarding if you know how to process it. And it's like, okay, it doesn't have to go 100% right every time. But every time you mess up or there is a failure, you have to know why, and you have to get better at not having to go through that same issue when you go again and do it again, that kind of problem.
An interesting point that you brought up, which I'm curious what you think, Richie, is this idea that I assume from your point of view, it's also this kind of, we didn't want to go through the normal path in film, which is go to LA, go to New York, work as a grunt for 5 years, do that stuff. And it's almost like some people seek that out because there's that safety in a larger entity. But then there's others that kind of want to like forge their own paths. They do go to like geographic industries that like Hong Kong, where there's kind of, Hong Kong did have a boom in its cinema scene, but these days it's not as great, but smaller than LA. And what do you think, Richie?
It's pretty interesting because like, for a long time during my freelance years, I existentially grappled with that idea of like, I'm not really a filmmaker until I go to film school, or like there's, because you only have your peers to really like sort of like understand what level you're at, or like sort of, I guess like understand yourself or compare yourself to, is what I'm trying to say. But so for a long time, and part of it's also because, I have an Asian mom who is from an older generation who still doesn't really understand what I do. And so, for her, it's kind of like, oh, it's like unknowns and instability. Like, and so, as you said, it is a very, that is in a way the natural process of like, especially before, you go to film school, you go to LA, you go to London, you probably work through the ranks if you don't have connections. If you have connections, maybe you'll be 20 DPing some film, I don't know. But for me, it was kind of existential, like, do I do that? And I actually, like, for a good 3-4 years, I was looking at lots of different film schools, and then I think it took me a while, probably till my late 20s, when, I realized, like, actually, video and film, there's a huge sort of spectrum of what can be done. And I think because we're part of the generation that, we're on the tail end of the DSLR like revolution. Yeah. Then everything became digital and accessible. And, now you have kids in their 16, 17, they're like freaking great shooters because they've grown up with cameras, they have YouTube video tutorials. So in a way, like, it's so much more accessible. And in a way, like, your traditional route is not as, it's one way of getting into film, but there's also, there's like corporate videos, there's like documentaries, there's news, there's a huge like plethora of like different types of videos you can be shooting. So yeah, going back to your question, like, what do I think? I guess in a way, I feel like I don't need to go to film school now, or I guess like maybe a lot of people also say you don't need to, you just learn for the job. And fortunately, I think I've kind of learned from the job, and I feel like I'm at a level where, I'm feeling pretty competent, and
Yeah. One thing that I noticed because we do kind of hire we've had some interns and some employees that have come and gone, and we have experienced, and also some freelancers we work with. I do notice this is not me throwing shade at film school people. I'm not throwing shade at
We can throw it.
but I have noticed that people who first start out from a film school background, when they fresh out, I think I expected, oh, these guys are really good, but they don't move at the speed in which I've noticed people who haven't gone through film school. They had to like run and gun their entire life, learn things on the go, the nitty and gritty. And I think like I will work with someone who's never been to film school, but has worked in like, it's only a year or two, but they move so fast and they have good shots. And then you'll have someone same amount of time in the industry, but went to film school and they're a little slower. And it's not, I don't think.
It's because it's like a learned process. It's actually like, even say, for example, when I work with gaffers or DP who maybe most of the time they do cinema or film, they have a very, they have a storyboard. They have, everything's kind of planned out. So they plan in their sort of pre-lights, their moves and stuff. So they have a very like, in a way it's kind of nice. It's like slow. You get to knock off that one shot that you really want. But for, I guess like, more corporate commercial filming, you don't have that time. You don't have that budget. You don't have the crew, and
Absolutely.
You're, I mean, in a way, maybe looking back on it, it's, I'm quite fortunate the fact that I had to like struggle for, like freaking, even a couple of years ago, I remember working in news. It would be like me doing everything, I basically did everything. And it took a while for me to just be like, no, I can't do, I don't want to do editing because I'm, I got too short with the clients. I don't understand why they're giving me like all this feedback, and I think that kind of pivoted me to more specialize more into like producing or camera operating or directing is a sort of newish thing I'm trying to get better at. So
what I wanted to say is that like when you said about like how film school students are slower, I think it's because when you're raised to learn film in a schooling environment, you have time to get better. You have time to improve. Like you're basically, anytime you go on, you do shoots or you have assignments and stuff, you have time to kind of like plan it out and rehearse. And then generally when you're on big film sets where you have months to shoot and you have hundreds and hundreds of crew members all with their own responsibilities, you can take your time a little bit more because you only have to do one specialized thing, right? You only have to do one particular job. Like if you're an AC, you're only an AC. If you're a gaffer, you're only a gaffer. If you're a DIT, you're only DIT. So you only do your one job. When you're on a smaller set or like in a very confined kind of environment, like where we shoot, where it's like maybe at max 3 or 4 crew members, everyone has to do double duty. Everyone has to do a little bit of everything, which means people have to be way quicker at being able to address any issues they see, but also be really fast at knowing, where to put things. We need to light it this way. We need to make sure that like everything is turned off, like sound and stuff. We have to make sure that people don't just walk in and out. Like you have to be really quick to address these things, which if you're growing up in a film school environment, you don't get because everything's kind of done for you already in a way, right? Because the teacher would tell you to put it here or there and all that.
When you just have the manpower, as you said, who just specialize in that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this is something that I feel like both of us probably have gone a lot better at after being in this industry for this long, is that we start to know that we want to be specialists in certain fields, right? Because the longer that you work, at least this is my opinion, if the longer you work as kind of an all you can do, an all hands on kind of thing where you just operate everything, you're like a one man band kind of situation, you kind of lose focus on what it is that you actually want to do. Because not everyone is that interested in wanting to be a cam op or wanting to be a director or producer or editor. Maybe they only want to do one thing. And the reality is I feel like the more specialized you are in one thing, you actually feel more like you're contributing better in a way because you're really just focusing on the one thing that someone is asking you to do. And then you don't have to worry so much about all the little nitty gritty details that might come and, come your way.
Sounds like you're a film school talking, bro.
It is kind of. I mean,
yeah, are you just like justifying film school?
I mean, I can be. I'm not saying film school is a waste, but it's just different.
I think if we look at both film school and starting off without film school, I think film school teaches you everything you need to know if you were in the most ideal situation, right? Not going to film school, the other route is just throwing in the deep end and you kind of learn everything as you go. It just depends on the type of person, right? I also know that on like actual legit Hollywood film sets, like a sound technician cannot touch a light. He's like
And why
legally
would-
not
and
allowed
why
to
would
touch a light.
And why would they?
If someone says, "Hey, Dave, the sound technician, can you move that light out of the way?" He'd be like, "Sorry, I
Exactly.
legally cannot."
Exactly.
Like there's certain things about that. So
It's very set roles.
Yeah.
It's not as fluid in terms of.
I mean, I can see even like our director when we're on shoots, my boss. He's like a born and bred editor. Everything is based on editing. So when he sees the lighting or sets it up, I know he's thinking about how that's going to look on the cutting room floor. When he sets up the sound or the shot that comes, he's always looking from an editing perspective. So like at his heart, he's an editor. If he went to film school, he would have found editing. But he has to do all sorts of other things, and I think it's just the trade-off.
But actually, I think that's a great marker of a director, and I think because actually, some directors I work with that, if you understand your craft and the story you're telling, I mean, you're talking about roles. Directors, it's an all-encompassing role where you're controlling the narrative in a way, but being able to edit in your head in a way like, I will take 5 seconds here, 5 seconds here as you're shooting it is great because already you're sequencing in your head. Something which I'm improving on as a DP. I'm like, everything looks beautiful. Everything has to be bokeh and buttery, but not everything can be. It depends on the story.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, actually, so before we move on to one question, Richie, I actually have a question for you. Caius, you previously mentioned that you knew from 10 years old that you want to be in film.
Yeah.
Where did that come from? What was that? Did you watch something and you were like, that's what I want to be, or where did that?
So yeah, so I think the way I got into film was because my dad really loves watching movies, and so from a very young age, like I was watching him, like we would go rent DVDs and all the time, and the one that really registered when I was that young was the Star Wars Episode 1. The
remake when it came out in like 97
the
or
1999 one.
Yeah. I remember
the first of the prequel trilogy.
Oh.
I was obsessed with that movie to a degree that is just wild. Like I had the VHS of it, I have the VCD of it, I had the DVD of it.
Wow.
I don't know why I didn't need all three.
Did you have the Laserdisc?
I did not have Laserdisc. I didn't have Laserdisc. It was past Laserdisc at that time. Yeah. But like I think that movie just showed me what it was like to be immersed in a world that is unlike the world that we live in. And when you're a child, seeing that come to life on a screen just kind of builds upon on every foundation that you've ever had in life. It's just like, oh wait, we can't actually go to space like this. We can't see planets like this, but we can visualize it the way we want to on the screen, and we can make it entertaining, we can make it fun. And over the years, obviously, as you get older, you see the cracks and all that. But that's only because as a filmmaker, you know that there's a lot of things that they could have done better. And I think watching that made me realize this is what is possible. And so I would try and do everything in my way possible to do that as a career, because that was the only thing I could see. Like you were saying earlier, is like we're not the kinds of people that could sit still. Like we can't sit at a desk forever. Like even if I'm sitting at a desk and I'm editing, I need to be doing something like that. I need to be seeing something visually go across my screen where I'm like, okay, I can move pieces here to kind of make it better. That's kind of how I got into the film industry, and then that's how I got into wanting to make films. Basically, is from watching that.
That's kind of interesting. Like, did you ever have this where, I mean, you say I say I didn't study film, but actually in uni, I remember studying like a lot of film history and film theory, which is very different from practical film making. Yeah. But I don't know if this occurred with you after you kind of like had this gaze of like, this perspective of a filmmaker. Like whenever you watched a film, you just like try and break down everything. It kind of ruined movies for me for like 5-6 years. Where I'm just like, oh, how's that shot? Like, where's that light coming from? Or like, how do they get that move? Or like, is that the sound off in the background or something?
That is forever one of the things I think now that you work in the industry that is always going to be kind of like a black hole that you kind of just end up diving into. You'll watch the movie, be like, oh, the sound was off there, or I can see the like the green screen element or here, like, or where they've added visual effects. Like, it's really hard to separate yourself from that.
But then it's actually kind of interesting because I feel like you kind of develop this like gut instinct, you know? Because same thing. I miss that naive kind of like idealistic of like escaping into a world. I still remember like freaking crying in Lion King and like Black Beauty and all those freaking Disney as a child. And you're like, oh my god, like this, like the horse is dying. But in a way, I guess like in a way, like maybe it's testament to our experience or whatever. But now when we watch something that's good, I feel like I'm like, damn, like that's good, that's tight, you know, that's solid, like everything's so like, yeah, and maybe that's like filmmaker arrogance, I don't know, but it's kind of like, you know, like there is an understanding when something's done well, you know it's done well, you know, when it's seamless or like
So I do have a question just for, you know, obviously this conversation is about other people who are interested in becoming freelancers or entering the world of freelance. What's the first step? Is it buy the gear? Is it
all the gear?
Find the friend that can get you the job? Like, what is the first step?
You basically need an entire gear truck before you even press record. That's how you start. No. No.
You need a truck then too, right?
Yeah, you if you're under 18, you need a license. You know, wait till you're 18.
I don't know if you necessarily have. There's no right answer for this. I think because it really depends on how you want to operate as a freelancer. A freelancer, you can be a freelance in so many ways, right? Like you can be a freelance cam op, you can be a freelance editor, you could be a freelance director or producer. In which case, if you're like a producer or director, you don't need gear, really. You just need yourself, a laptop, and your phone. That's really it, you know? But for DPs and cam ops, obviously they need cam gear, they need all the supports, tripods, and accessories. I'm primarily focusing now as a freelance editor. I have obviously a lot of gear because I started off doing a lot of freelance cam op work as well. But now I kind of focus a lot of my efforts on editing, which means just getting a really very stable laptop, all the programs, plugins, assets, all that kind of stuff. But it's really different. I don't think there's an easy way to get into freelancing unless you're ready to spend a lot of time networking, connecting with people, and also just knowing that the quality of your work needs to be good enough that people will always come back to you because they know that you will deliver no matter what quality of no matter what kind of content you're asking them to do. At the same time, I think what's really important is just to establish good working relationships with people, especially as someone is like, especially if you're a freelance cam op or DP or an editor. Having a good producer, I think, is really important to have on your side because producers do a lot of heavy lifting with client management, with scripts, with, you know, all that kind of stuff, managing the actual product that's going to go out. And you, as a result, only have to really focus on your job. Going back to what I was saying about specializing in things, right? I think like the more you're good at that, the more people will come to you for that specific kind of role. It's like, oh, I need a really reliable editor to do like this kind of work. I'm called upon 90% of the work I do now for that specifically because I focus all of my efforts into doing that. Back when I was doing cam op and editing, a lot of times you'll get saddled with projects that will require you to basically do everything, and the client will liaise with you and they'll ask you to do a lot with very limited time and quite limited budget. And that can be kind of stressful and tedious because you're never really in full control over what you do because you have to jump around and do this and do this and do this and do this. And for some people, it's a reliable, steady source of work and income. But for me, it's like, I know I'm not satisfied with my own work as purely a cam op or as a director. So I would much rather focus my skill set into what I'm really good at, which is editing. And that's in many ways, like it's hard to branch out from that because you don't want to pivot too much in too many different directions.
Okay. Yeah. What about you, Richie?
I feel like Caius has said everything now. No, I mean, it's like getting into it. I don't know.
Let's say that someone's asked you. So a young 18-year-old, maybe just out of film school or not out of film school.
Sure.
And he says, I want to be a filmmaker, you know, and freelance is the position that I want to go to. like I want to be a freelancer, what would be like the first thing you tell them to do?
I mean, I feel like Caius has said a lot of good stuff. Like having a good producer is very important because usually they're the ones who will be getting the jobs and project managing. But I guess like, I don't know, like to get into it, I'd just say go in with an open mind, you know, like start, if that's, you know, if you're young, you don't really know what you want to do until you've kind of pushed yourself and you've, you know, gone through struggle, you know, and if you can deal with that struggle and actually maybe enjoy parts of it, then actually that's already a good thing to keep you on track. So I don't like, you know, I'd say go in with an open mind, really feel around, you know, maybe I can relate to some of how I went through it, but, you know, be brave, be courageous, do different things. Don't be worried about messing up. Build a big network. You know, I think early on I wouldn't say I was that trustworthy, or maybe not, trustworthy is not a good word, as reliable as I could have been. You know, I think part of it, that was immaturity. And I think, yeah, you'll feel your way around. Eventually, you know, you'll feel confident or competent within whatever you want to specialize in. And I think, you know, if you get a chance to work in different roles, I think that's really important, because I think just for me doing producing or editing, I really appreciate when I have a good producer, when I have a good editor, when I have a good team. You know, I really, because sure, I could do it on my own, but at the same time, I know my shortcomings and I know where I'm not good at certain things. So yes, I'd say like go in with an open mind, persevere, see if it fits with you, and if it doesn't, there's plenty of other jobs out there. And
I have noticed, like, you know, working with and seeing a lot of freelancers, it is somewhat of a tight-knit community where it's not like they won't let you in, but when you are in, you get to know like these gaffers, these DPs, these editors, and it's just about reaching out to one. You reach out to one, and then you start meeting other people through them, and then through them you meet other people, and you start building. You just need to find one. He or she doesn't even have to be the best. They just need someone that knows others, and you just got to work with them.
Or you work well with. I actually think that's one thing I really liked about freelancing, is that sure, you would have maybe like a certain like specific crew that you work with, but actually I really enjoyed being able to, like, depending on the project, bring in people or friends that I haven't seen in a while, and I'm like, dude, like, come and let's work together, and that all, I guess, kind of feeds into my idea of philosophy, is like I want to make it an enjoyable experience, a constructive experience, like, because another big thing I've learned early on is, you know, being on film sets are stressful. You know, there's a lot of crap being thrown around. You have to kind of have tough skin. You need to be able to, as I said, persevere, and maybe don't take things as personally, or be so precious on something. And I think, maybe that's what separates, you know, the ones that float to the top and the ones you kind of sink, because it's not an easy job. You know, it's really not. There's long hours. You get pushed physically, mentally, and I think it's, you have to really enjoy it, I think, to be in this industry.
Because what he was saying about like how when you work as a freelancer, you can bring in different people for different roles or for different reasons. And like, I think I agree with that, in that like one of the best things about being a freelancer is that you get to jump around and work on a very wide range of projects, right? You have your pick of what projects you want to work on as well, that you want to focus on. But in the situation where it's like, oh, I don't usually do cam op kind of stuff, but if I know it's an opportunity to work with someone I really admire, or someone that I've always wanted to work with, absolutely I would jump on that, right? It's an opportunity to meet people, learn from people, get experience that you might not normally get if you were just like in a production house where you're working with the same crew. And there's benefits to that too, because that way you really build a repertoire with the people that you work with, and you have a shorthand that you can really rely on. But sometimes working in this industry is not necessarily just about what you're just doing the same thing over and over and over again. It's about branching out and exploring what there is, because the medium itself has changed so much. We were talking about like digital cameras now. Everyone has ways of creating with anything in their hands and their pockets nowadays. But that also means that you have so much more room to really explore what you want to do, what kind of creative endeavors you can kind of really jump and approach on. Not everything is for everyone, but I think if you're only in a production house, you only do certain kinds of things, you specialize in that. But if you don't like you don't like what you do all the time and you want to branch out, being a freelancer is really the only option for that. That's also why, for me personally, I've decided to stay in freelancing, because I like knowing that the next project I have could be so different from the one I just did.
Yeah, actually, I wanted to add to that is the fact, don't maybe early on, don't specialize too much in one thing, because I feel like if you get to I was lucky enough to work in news, did video, online videos, worked on some short films, some documentaries, all sorts. And I think, because it's funny, because this leads back to when I first started. Someone's like, you should do wedding videography. It's really good money. You get flown around. And I'm like, yeah. I mean, this is back in the day, this snobby kind of artsy cinema or person's like, it's an art form, blah, blah, blah. But, that's not discounting wedding videographers. It's a freaking art. You see people, they nail down the shots they need. They edit. It's same day edit. It's kind of crazy, but sure, if you want to specialize and you're really good at it, go for it. But if not, then feel around. Don't be afraid to do different projects, because that's actually what I used to love about freelancing. It's why I stayed a freelancer. Is the fact that I never knew what projects I was going to get. And I never knew, there were so many situations where I'd have to pinch myself, because I'm standing in the presidential office of the Nepali president with a super, wealthy Hong Kong businessman. How am I in this situation? This is another talking point. It's access. The fact that you, as a filmmaker, you get to meet such a huge variety of people. And being a bit of a people person, I like to meet new people. I like to find out people's stories and stuff, and that's very inspiring for me.
That's fun. I mean, that's another aspect I've been thinking about with freelancing is just access and just the variety that you get. I actually wanted to ask what I think many people, as a touchy subject that many people don't like talking about. How do you, as a freelancer, identify your rate and justify
your rate?
Your rate. How do you identify your rate?
We're gonna go there.
Yeah. How do you identify your rate, and how do you justify?
You just don't tell other freelancers.
Yeah. People ask all the time. It's do you know how much this person will cost, or how much is it going to cost? I'm like, there's no easy way to give you a number, right? Because every person is different. Every person will charge based on what they feel is appropriate, and they might have asked other people, and other people might have given them a number, but then you should know whether the amount of work you put in is worth the amount of money that you're asking for. Some people tell me that they hire some videographers for 2,000 Hong Kong dollars to do filming and editing. And I look at that, I'm like, that is ridiculous. But there are some people who need the work. And I don't want to downplay that, because for some people, they want to get into the industry. They're willing to take whatever jobs they need and get whatever money it is just to get their name out there. But at the same time, it also, in a way, it kind of devalues what an actual freelancer's rate should be. So, but I think it also, in time, you learn that you can actually up your rates, and that's acceptable, because if people really want to hire you, you should be charging and getting what you want. And if they don't want to do it, unless you're in very desperate times, you shouldn't budge on that.
It's funny, because I was going to say very early on, your rates, because this is something I've learned the hard way as well. It's your rates, in a way, is very much tied to how you value yourself and your work. And early on, first few projects I did, I was paid $1,000 to shoot, edit, and you do these jobs. And I think it took me and part of it is the existential question, which I always ask myself, am I a filmmaker? What am, how do I, am I there yet? Am I?
Do I deserve this much? Yeah.
Sure. And I think, and part of that is, experience. Part of that is knowing yourself, knowing how to value yourself. And I think, we can go into nitty-gritties of, rates, whatever. I think, but for me, for example, when I was a freelancer, it actually really depended on the project. If I was working with a commercial corporate client, they have money, they're spending on something. So, you would have kind of a commercial corporate rate. Then I would have maybe a mate's rate. Then I would have like a social enterprise / voluntary rate, you know, where I'd be I'm doing this to be a good person kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it got to a stage, I think a couple of years back, where I just separated and I was like, am I doing it for money or for glory? You know, and a big thing is like, you know, if I need to survive, it's for money. But if I want to, you know, up my own artistic kind of level or whatever, or like pursue something more interesting, that's for glory, you know, and that I can do for free.
Right.
Yeah, I say that for free.
Not for free.
But, you know, maybe not for free, but it depends on the project, you know, and I think I've had to very much delineate like between both, because like if I'm just doing it for money, then I'm just selling my soul. And
I think that's kind of a point that we got to, where in a sense where, yes, there is a branch of, you know, Sheng Productions that, you know, I'm going to speak for the company as of now, but there is a branch of the company that focuses on pulling in money and it is corporate work. But then there's other parts where we're just like, we want to make this portfolio piece because this is what we want. We have a vision, so we will just cover the costs. Just cover the costs or whatever that can cover, and then we will put in our own money, because this will lead to work that we may eventually get paid a lot for, right? So next question I'd like to ask is, you know, both of you, we've just talked about the separation between what puts food on the table and what is for glory or portfolio piece. Let's go down the route of corporate work, the stuff that puts food on the table, which is, we can all agree, is the bread and butter of all freelancers. Yes, you can't, you know, making a 15-minute short film about the life of a wallet is not going to feed you, right? So corporate work.
you can dream.
I'm thinking of ideas now.
Yeah, I know.
So approach to corporate work. Do you have this for you? Is it a separation in your mind where you're like, okay, I'm just going to get this out of the way. There's a formula. I know what they like. Let's just turn it out. Or do you kind of apply this passion for film to this corporate work? What's your approach?
It's tricky because there's never a one glove fits kind of all solutions situation ever, right? Like every project you take on, depending on the client, depending on the brief, depending on the output of the project, where it's going, who's it being shown for, like what kind of platform is it for, there's so many different ways to go about it. And you try your best to like approach it with your own kind of filmmaker sense of mind. But the reality is, unless you're in full control of the project from the beginning, like you're the director, you're the producer, you're the writer, you're the editor, all that, even then, like if the client's gonna tell you to change some things, that could mess everything up. So it's really hard to balance that, but obviously you try your best to kind of give it your own sense of flair, you know? And sometimes you might have to put your ego aside to kind of just do it, because like you said, it's bread and butter. It's just, you have to find a way to make money to put food on the table, to pay your bills and all that stuff. So you have to look the other way sometimes. So, and that's also what you were talking about earlier about like balancing out when you do projects that are kind of like you would say for the glory and for the money, right? For the money stuff, I think I try not to get too personal in it. I just try to do the best job I can so that the client is happy with that product, or if they do have feedback, that the feedback is not so ridiculously overwhelming that it makes me feel like I have to work twice as hard to make up for all the work I just did. Because it does happen. Sometimes clients would be like, I don't like it at all. I mean, you're like, but then what would you like? You know, you have to be sensible enough to be able to approach them and say, what is it that you actually want then? Or to have that conversation before anything even starts and be like, okay, this is what we can do with what budget you have, with the timeline you have. And the more you can get that point across in the beginning, the easier it is when you actually get the project going, because then there's no loose ends and threads that you have to kind of pull back on. When you don't have that conversation early on, it becomes way more difficult because the client's expectations and your expectations might be completely different. And that makes the actual whole process way more stressful. And then you're gonna feel like, I never wanna do this again. So it's, again, like it's good communication with the client, with the producers, with your team, to make sure everyone understands what they're trying to achieve. And hopefully you find a good middle ground, because not every project will always be exactly the way you envision it to be, just based on so many little details and things that just don't go your way. So you just make the best of what you can, and then you move on. I try not to look too personally on some of these things, because I know it will just kind of eat away at my own abilities, and that's not healthy, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know what you think.
Back, I mean, like going off what Caius was saying, actually, like, you know, people might think like to be a good freelancer is not just to be a good editor. It's not just to be a good camera operator or director. It's actually, you need soft skills like communicating. Communicating is really important, you know, like figuring out the brief early on, communicating that, being on the same wavelength as your clients is very important, because, you know, same thing, learning the hard way. When you don't establish these kind of rules or boundaries in a way, you can easily get stepped on and pushed over, and then you don't feel good about yourself. The client doesn't, you know, feel good about themselves. No one feels good about themselves. So
and
I think
you might not get hired again by this particular.
Sure, and I think so that's why I do think freelancers, it's a good thing, because, you know, if you were to join a production company and just specialize in one thing, you might miss out on these soft skills of dealing with clients, client management, dealing with your own time, your own discipline, your own kind of value system. Or like the way you do things, I'd say. So yeah, that's very important, to be able to communicate that. I think like another thing I've learned is that you're like, if the client's happy, I'm happy. So for me, the way I approach it is very much like, this is the bottom line. This is, you know, especially when in a market that's very much like quite set in their ways, you know, or like they don't really want to push boundaries too much. So you have to kind of, you know, you know what the bottom line is. This is what they'll be happy with. Like, and then you kind of ask yourself, like, how can I push that? Do I have the time to push that? Can I afford to push that? And I think, I mean, this is something I'm still learning as well and trying to implement. And I think that's a very important thing to kind of have in your mind, because it allows you to focus on your creative ideals, but also do what you're being hired for. Do your work. You know, if the client's not happy, then, you know, why are they spending their hard-earned cash on you and, you know, giving you the time? Like, there's been instances clients are like, oh, my son why don't you film on an iPhone? I'm like, why don't you hire your son to film this?
It's a weird way, because people are educated nowadays to consume content in a very quick, like straightforward way, that they assume that anyone who has something similar can do exactly the same thing. But it's not. Like, it's a lot about communicating like what you want and knowing how you could execute that vision to the best of your abilities, while also helping them understand what is possible, what is not possible without more assets and all that. And sometimes educating them is a good thing, because that means that your working relationship with them is a lot more streamlined, and you don't have to worry about having to over-explain certain things. It really is difficult to explain minute things about editing or about cameras and all that stuff, but you don't know if it's even worth it. But if they're willing to go down that route with you and you can explain to them, then hopefully in the future, when you keep working with them, you don't really need to go through that anymore. And it's easy, but it's different for every client, every project.
That's a very important lesson as well, is the fact, I mean, that's also something like you need to kind of like break the fourth wall, kind of like be very mindful of, is actually a lot of the clients you deal with, you know, we as industry professionals, you know, we rabbit hole and down these kind of expertise and knowledge and everything. We forget that the everyday person doesn't understand as much about filmmaking or whatever. And I think going back to communicating, a big part of it is allowing, you know, you understanding your process, but being able to communicate that to the clients is very important. So they kind of are able to value your time, your expertise as well. You know, that's an important thing to learn. You know,
I did like that point that you made about how, you know, you have that piece of corporate work. You figure out, you establish the client whether or not you can do it, what's possible. But then once that's set up, you find the wiggle room for creativity and a bit of your passion to do it. I mean, you can't film a quarterly thought leadership talking head for a financial company with a POV camera. You know, it's too experimental.
Unless you convince the client that that's like the next big thing.
Communication again. If you can communicate that somehow, wow.
I mean, this is
where up a whole new avenue, right?
This is where good directors are good, because they, you know, if you can sell that pitch, that concept, and execute it,
exactly.
you know, and the client likes it, you know, like.
But yeah, there's certain standards, and then you set up, you understand what the product is, and then you maybe play with the lighting, or you know, do something that does express creativity, but understand who your client is.
Yeah.
But also understand sometimes you might do these little things and the client will not understand it,
or they might not even notice.
Yeah, exactly. And then, you know,
notice.
I could be perfecting the way my hair or shoulder, like, you know, wraps around your body, but all they see is a pretty image, and you know,
they don't understand why.
Yeah, they don't understand why or how I got to that stage of.
Okay, so next question is I want to ask is, you know, you have all this time set out. You know, I've seen your schedules. Freelancer schedules are not clear cut, right? You sometimes work 3 weeks straight, weekends included, and then you suddenly have like 2 months of nothing. Yeah. And then it goes to another 3 months of just back-to-back crushing kind of work, and then it's like 2 months of nothing, right? How do you find time to work on passion projects? Because I know both of you have. You did No Going Back a couple years ago, and you have work I've seen. You're working on the Heartbreaker, the Melvis documentary. This is something I read that it's something quite personal to you, because you actually had a personal relationship with Melvis. Something you want to build up. And then I've seen other stuff. I'm not sure if it was by you, but there was Daffodil and Back Then.
Yeah, there's Daffodil with Nicola Fan. Shout out. Passion projects, you know, for me, you know, it could be doing like a music video or like stuff like that. Because, you know, music videos are a chance to be a bit more creative and fun. And, you know, I'm still, how do I find time for it? You just have to find time for it, you know, like. As a freelancer, for me, actually, the harder thing to get used to was being comfortable when you have downtime, you know, and respecting that. Because sometimes as a freelancer, you have this mentality of like, it's a survival mentality where it's very much like, I need to be working, you know, and I'm quite privy to burning out, you know, and part of it's because I put a lot into whatever I'm working on. But I think, you know, it's appreciating the downtime. You know, for me, I got into a nice groove for I think the past 3-4 years before I became full-time. My downtime I would spend with my mom. I'd go have dim sum with her. You know, I'd go look after myself, I'd do exercise. You know, I'd eat well. I'd try and live well. You know, sleep well. Because when you're busy as a freelancer, it could be like consuming. You know, that's your life. You know, and that's why, you know, look after yourself. That's a very important thing. You know, be wary of your mental and physical health.
The passion project could be you're yourself.
Whoa, that's messy, man.
But
you're turning the lens back on me.
It can be a really sink or swim mentality sometimes when you're a freelancer, right? It's like if you don't work, that suddenly you're gonna be sinking below the surface and you're never going to get back up because people are going to forget about you or something. But after doing it for so many years, I think you learn, like you said, like you have to maintain a good standard for yourself, like being healthy, you know, looking out for yourself, spending time with the people that you love, and not caring so much about having to take on every single job that you do. In the first few years, yes, I think you kind of have to. Like that is being a freelancer. You have to establish yourself in this industry first, and to some degree of expertise and professionalism, so that even if you maybe take a month off or take time off to either do your own personal projects or go traveling or do other things, you have that network that will always be there waiting. And then they'll be like, oh, when are you back? Oh, we need you. Can you help out on this? And then you can plan ahead for that, knowing that, okay, I have a month of downtime, but then after that, I'm right back into it. And once you're right back into it, that's all you do. And I think that's actually, for me, why I like staying as a freelancer, because I like knowing that I can take time to do what I want in that time. But then right after, I'm like, jump right back in. It's like, what do you got? Like, just give me everything. I'll take it. Because in that time, you prioritize work, and other times, you prioritize yourself. And not every person as a freelancer gets opportunities like that, but when you do, I actually think it's so good, because you don't have to worry about going to work necessarily every day. When you do have time for yourself, you use it to the advantage that you have, like, which is, you know, spend time with your family, like you said, spend time with your family, spend time with, you know, like looking after yourself, you know, just going to the gym, picking up a hobby. A lot of the times when you're in this industry, you don't have time for a lot of those things if you're working nonstop. So having that downtime, I think is a blessing and a benefit to being a freelancer. Absolutely.
It's interesting when you say like, how do you have time for your glory projects? It's interesting because sometimes it's not even my own project; it will be a friend's project. But I'd be very, Saffron, the kung fu film where I died like 3 or 4 times in it as a stuntman, waiting for it to come out. That's another thing I don't mind spending my time on. Is if someone else wants to do like a cool short film or cool MV or whatever, like I don't need to be the DP for that. I can be like a grip or an AC or just this is actually where you go back to the fun and I think the true spirit of filmmaking when you're all in it together. You don't have much money, but you're making things work, and you try and help out, and it's a very nice, like, inclusive experience because everyone's working towards this one goal. Whether you're pushing the dolly, you're being a grip and you're getting that like nice smooth motion as you're like slowing down, you're creeping into the shot, getting that parallax.
I will say that like when you're younger, I think you have that drive and that hunger to really want to do a lot of these short films. I did way more short films when I was in high school and college and right after college. But I think once you start working, it's really hard to find a balance because when you do creative projects and if you're doing it on your own, you have to write scripts, you have to find crew that are usually busy with, paid work, and then you have to, find space to do your shoots, you have to edit and all that stuff. And once you tie all those things in together, it could become so over-encompassing that you actually just forget about it or you move on. But the reality is, like, if you're really passionate about it, you try your best to allocate resources and time for that, and you hope that whatever you're doing, you can find and encourage other people to be on board, like friends or other people who you've met in the industry. But it's you have to kind of balance it. There's never going to be a perfect amount of time to do your personal project. You just have to do it in whatever free little time you have. We've worked on a few of these together now, and like we just find time to do it when we can.
I've got a backlog of personal projects I haven't finished.
It happens. It happens.
From what I've heard so far today, I think it's being a freelancer and being in the freelance industry. It's hectic. It's crazy. It's time. It takes up so much of your life, but there's a feeling of we are the renegades. When you're on a crew, it's like being a part of like a crew working, as you said, working towards that shot. There's this community aspect that you have to it. And if you are, for anybody that is interested in the freelance life, it's tough. It's a tough one, but when is life not tough? And this is a very interesting one where you get very different exposures to different things and you meet some great people. I think that's all the time we have for today. I do want to thank you guys for joining us. On the note of freelancing, do you guys have any final words that you want to say to the audience who might be interested or want to know a little bit more about freelancing? Any final words?
Give it a try, I'd say. If it suits you, it suits you. If it doesn't, that's okay. But it's always good. Freelancing is a very nice spot to kind of turn the spotlight on yourself and to really force yourself to dig deep. And I think you learn a lot from yourself. And this is after, 8 years or 7, 8 years of me freelancing to get to this stage. And sometimes you'll really question yourself and, and question everything, but persevere,
Yeah, I think it's definitely like you're in it. If you're going to be in it, you have to be in it for the long run. It's not a 1 year, like you'll see results kind of situation. Like if you really want to be a successful freelancer, you got to persevere. You got to be open-minded. You got to be compassionate. You got to be like confident in what you bring to the table. You have to communicate what you want and what you're good at and how you will bring your best A game to the table to all the people that you work with. And you just got to be nice to people.
Okay, well, on that note, I again like to thank both my guests, Richie Fowler and Caius Chung, for joining us today on the first episode of Filmmakers Journey podcast. Thank you for taking time out of your day to join us here. And for the audience, thank you for listening. Join us next time on episode 2, where we speak to Nazrul Ekram and Sarah Wun on film as a creative outlet. See you guys next time.